The story I want to bring you this week is called The Preacher in the One Door Church. And here's how the story goes. In this church that sat out in the countryside with one door to it, it was a small church. It just so happened one of the members of the church passed away, and the preacher was called to preach his sermon. And he began to preach the sermon, and the members in the church was consoling his wife. In the meantime, he was preaching the sermon for old Luke. As he began to preach, and he started talking about old Luke, what a wonderful man old Luke was. Luke did no round to anybody. If any round was done, Luke done it to himself, but he would never do any round to anyone else. And as he continued to preach, old Luke's wife Martha, she couldn't compose herself any longer. She made scream out and she lay back in a frenzy, and those ladies jumped to their feet because they don't want Martha to be embarrassed after days passed of what had happened while she was mourning for her husband. So they made a circle around her and consoled her until she came back around to herself. So that made the preacher, he started rearing up and stopped moving his sermon up another notch. As he moved that sermon up another notch, he began to bring in his sermon like this. I can see old man Luke now. He's up in heaven and he is drinking milk and he is eating honey and he is walking the golden pave up there. And as he continued preaching, and he said, I can see old man Luke. Can't you just see him? And you will believe that the Rev was trying to put old man Luke into heaven just by his sermon. If his sermon was going to put him in heaven, he certainly was going to go in heaven that day at the funeral. And he took it up another notch higher. And he said, I can hear God right now, just like God did Lazarus. Rise, Lazarus. And so he's telling old man Luke, rise, Luke, rise. And as the Rev, he just ray up and jump up, rise, Luke. And the people in the church, they were pep up. He had them all pep up and they were interested in what he had to say and they were clapping. And all of a sudden, he noticed the whole congregation stood up on his feet, stood up on their feet. As they stood up on their feet, he got more happier. And he said, I can hear God tell Luke, rise, Luke. But he didn't have no idea at the same time that Luke was opening the coffin. And the members in the church noticed the coffin began to open. And as they stood up there and they started to walk to the aisle, moving their way out to the church, he thought they were getting happy. And so he took it up another notch and he said, I can hear God telling Luke to rise, Luke. And at that time, the coffin flew open and Luke sat up in the church. In the coffin, he sat up in the coffin. As he sat up in the coffin, and the members of the church, they break out and they start running toward the door. And as they ran toward the door, the preacher ran down from the pulpit and he started pushing through the crowd, tried to get out. But it was only a one door, and everybody was trying to get out that one door at the same time. And when that preacher finally got out of that door, and he ran away from that church at a good distance, and when he felt like he was safe away from it, he turned around and he looked back at that church and he said, God damn a one-door church. The end.